what if you fail? So I will say like, so what if you succeed? And also like, what is the definition of failure actually? Like, what is fail? Like, when do you actually, I think the only time you fail is if you actually just give up and not try or not start at all. Because if you fail, that means you just made a small mistake and you learn from it. So that's actually a gain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a failure. So I don't think anyone actually failed. You just have to just keep going and tackle it, problem solve, get over it. And then one day that person will succeed. There's no
That's
failure.
true. And even if you fail, so what?
Yeah, exactly. So what?
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Abigail Chin, a creative and content creator from Hong Kong. Trained as an interior designer, Abigail made a major career switch and quit her dream job as a corporate designer. She joins us to talk about when it's time to quit your 9-to-5 and how she makes it work financially as a freelancer. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. Now, continuing our Money Smart series in November, we are talking to smart Asians or Asians who have some smart money tips around the world to talk about how you can also get smart with your personal finances. And of course, these episodes are not going to be investment advice and we won't be doing stock picking. And rather, we are tapping into the collective money wisdom of our friends from around the world, and hopefully that can prepare you for some specific money situations. For example, whenever you're thinking about quitting your job or like if you're let go unexpectedly. So for those of you who have wondered about whether or not the 9-to-5 life is for you or even thinking about a career switch, this episode will hopefully point you in the right direction because our guest has done both of them. So now, without further ado, let's bring her in. Welcome to Proudly Asian, Abbie. Thanks for joining us. And how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me.
You know, like when I was thinking about doing this episode, I just couldn't think of a better person than you because, Abbie, I remember we met up briefly and then you were telling me about the story of like you quitting your dream corporate job and also made a significant career switch. So when I was brainstorming for this series, I was just like, I have to get Abbie to come on to share her story. Yeah, but
Perfect. I have a lot to say.
Yeah, but of course, before we get into that main conversation about how you did that, for our listeners to get to know a little bit more about you, why don't we start with the basic questions that we always ask every single guest on Proudly Asian, which will be, who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up, Abbie?
Yeah, so again, I'm Abigail Chin. So I was born and raised in Hong Kong and I studied in Hong Kong International School. And then halfway through high school, I made a transition to the United States. So I was actually in Chicago area because actually my dad's side is from Chicago. So my grandma's there, all my cousins are there. And so I pretty much lived with my grandma for 2 years in high school and then went to Purdue University in Indiana. So that was like my academic journey. And then basically after 4 years of Purdue University, I studied interior design as my major and then came back to Hong Kong and basically started working as an interior designer in Hong Kong. That's pretty much my journey.
Wow. So has becoming an interior designer always been your dream, or it was just something you figured out along the way at some point?
So actually, going into undergrad, I applied for biology. So I was actually going in for pre-med. And then obviously, because my mom my mom is a doctor, so that's why my brain, all I knew about was doctor at that time. So I was like, okay, you know, I don't really know much about what I wanted to do at that age. So let me just kind of like follow her footsteps. So I actually went in as biology major. And then, but I was always a creative. So going in after like 1 year, I was like, you know what, this is not for me. I'm gonna like switch my major to interior design. And thankfully, because I got some like summer credits out, so I was able to like graduate on time. So thankful for that. But yeah, complete
Wow.
switch. Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, even you made that career switch that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. You already made a major switch during your uni days. But I just want to quickly follow up on that. Was it a bit hard to maybe explain that switch to your parents?
For sure. Yeah. I remember like gulping down and like explaining it to my dad. And my dad was like, you better find a job. Like that was literally what he said. He's like, you better find a job when you graduate. Because no one in my family is ever in the design industry or in industry now. So, but in biology, like they were more used to like other doctors and stuff. And again, being Asian, lawyer, doctor, engineering. So that was expectation on me. And so going into design, they were supportive, but they were still iffy in the beginning.
So was there kind of like a, I don't know how you would describe that, but then there's like coming out moment where it's like, Mom, Dad, I decided to switch my major.
Completely. It felt like that. I was like, I also was in a point where I was like bawling because I don't know how to tell them. And it felt like, you know, at that age, you were just like trying to figure your life out. But at that age, actually, you were very young and you didn't know much and you're not out in the world yet. But it already felt like the first big change and like responsibility you had to tell your parents because like, you know, financially, like they're helping out.
And of course, that gets us to talk about another major switch that you made back in 2022, because like you quit your corporate job as an interior designer and became a full-time content creator. So can you walk us through that decision-making process? You know, what are some of the hardest hurdles that you had to overcome during making that decision? Or like, did you have to tell your parents, or are they even surprised? Like, okay, it's the second time. It's going to be easier now.
Okay, so like a little backstory about that. I actually didn't quit my job to become a content creator at that point. Like in 2022, I did not think of that yet. So because I graduated with an interior design degree, I came back to Hong Kong to do interior design. So that's all I knew, because first of all, I only knew about medical, like the industry. Then I went to interior design. All I focused was the design industry. So I researched and like, all I could think of was I want to climb up the corporate ladder and just land the highest, like the top design firm in the world. That's all I wanted to do. And that was my goal even since like university. So when I graduated, I was like, okay, let me search, you know, my first job, whatever, like find just a design job and then move up and hopefully get to the top. I didn't know that when I graduated, I would already land the top design firm in the world. Like the biggest design firm in the world. So in a way, I felt like those years, I was like, what else? And do I want to climb up the corporate ladder? And I was like working with my managers and directors, and I was looking at how they're working, what they're working at, the projects we're working at. And I was like, is that the job or career path that I want to continue climbing? And so, no, it wasn't fulfilling. After a few years, I was reevaluating my life. I was pretty much lost in my life. So I started actually an e-commerce business when I was still working in interior design. And that didn't last, but it gave me a glimpse of the online marketing industry. That kind of like showed me, oh, what's possible. But then again, I was still lost. And then obviously with my parents, like was like, okay, you came in interior design industry, so what now? And I was like researching, I was like looking at other industries. I was like HR, looking in like project management, construction industry, because I mean, still like interior design related, but project management, like architecture and all that. And then I was looking at other industries, like completely different industries. And I was like, I don't know. I'm just lost at that moment. But then I just knew that like at that moment, I didn't want to continue this interior design industry because I just don't know what else is there for me anymore. I wanted to learn and grow and I wasn't doing that. I felt like my passion has stopped. I felt like I have so much hard work that I'm not working towards something that I set. Like I visioned my goal in interior designer, but then now it's like the vision is like fading. So that's when I knew I had to like switch out. So the e-commerce gave me a glimpse again, and then I went into coaching. I found the coaching industry online because again, the e-commerce brought me into the online world, and I found coaching in the online space. So I started coaching, and I got a few clients actually in the beginning. And that's when I was like, oh, I can make money online. And then so I was like, okay, you know what? Let me just jump all in. So I actually quit cold turkey. Pretty much because I have like no backup plan whatsoever. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give this entrepreneurship a try. Yeah. So that's when I quit my job. And then I became a coach. And then so you were like, what was the hardest hurdle that I had to come through, right? The hardest hurdle is actually like just figuring out life at that point. Because again, medical to interior design to now like online industry, I know zero information about anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anyone. Again, my family like don't know anything either. So they're like, what are you doing?
The hardest part is like explaining what you're actually doing. Like, what is online marketing to them?
And that's like even more, that's harder to explain because at least architecture, interior design, they can see and they know what's going on. They can read about it. But like online marketing, they're so new to it that they're just like, what is this? And are you sure to make money? And I was like, yes, I see people do it. And they might think I'm a psycho and not working out. But like at that time, they were just like, you just have to start making money, or maybe give yourself like a 1-year timeline. Like if it doesn't work out, you go back to corporate. And so I had that in my mind, but I knew that I didn't want to because I knew that there's more for me in store. I knew that I wanted to work towards something else. So so I quit cold turkey, and then I also did a risk assessment test. So I actually weighed out the pros and cons. So I was like, happiness, finance, which one should I go towards? And then after listing out all the pros, all the cons, the pros outweighed everything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? It's a smart move, and there's no more point being here. So that's why I like gave my resignation letter.
just from you describing that process, right? I could definitely imagine, like mentally how hard it must be for you to navigate that, because like one day you'll be like, okay, maybe I should just stick to this, and then another day I know like I'm miserable in this, I don't want to be doing this for the next like decades or so. But if I could ask a follow-up question about that, right? Like after going through that whole thought process, and in the end you arrived at the decision, of course, quitting your job with nothing lined up. Was there ever like a trigger, for example, like, oh, maybe you're really kind of miserable, or something that really pushed you to that point? Or you would kind of describe that process as kind of like a step-by-step gradual process? It's kind of like the decision that you arrive at after weighing everything. So which one was that? Like, going through a slow process of figuring it out, or there was kind of like a trigger that pushed you to that point?
I think it was step by step. I think it was step by step for sure. Because when I realized that I didn't want my director's job, that's when I started the e-commerce, and that's when I started digging into the online space. So like it's really like going through the steps when I started realizing more about myself. I realized I didn't know much about myself. I just like followed the flow of life, I guess you can say, and like just corporate ladder, and that's all I knew of. So it was like it was a huge learning curve, a lot of growth. It really took it step by step before I even got to conclusion. I mean, I'm not gonna say I have it all figured out yet. I'm just saying I'm closer to where I want to be in life.
I definitely really resonate with that because a long time ago, after becoming a uni graduate, or when you were studying for uni, you would always think that, oh, okay, once I graduate from this degree, I'm going to become that. I'm going to eventually work my way towards that company and life will be all set, will be all great. But then little did we know, like coming out of the university degree, like nothing goes as planned. Like nothing goes according to like how we envisioned that would go. Because like when you're going to be able to get accepted to a certain company, when you're going to get that promotion, you can't really control that timing. And the adulting life, it just becomes a whole mess that like we can't even control. And eventually
Right.
I think like what I personally learned was that to really ride with the waves and be comfortable with the fact that we just really don't know what's going on at any given moment.
Completely. Like again, at that time I was a coach. So I didn't even know I was going to be a content creator right now. Right. So it's literally riding along the wave and just like figuring out what you like, what you don't like. And then, just go on from there. I think that's what life is, right? You just figure out slowly what you like and just like what are you good at, and then just work towards that.
Yeah. So I really like how you mentioned the framework of like you actually listing out all the pros and cons before you make that final decision, which I think is a very useful framework for like everyone when it comes to any life decisions, like whether or not they move to a new country, whether or not they get married, they have kids. I think they should all use this really simple framework. But of course, you mentioned finance was one of the aspects that you thought about when you were like outlining the pros and cons. So how much did finances weigh in that like decision process? How did you prepare yourself to get there financially?
Yeah. So, as I said, I took a huge risk at that moment in time. I think my passion in finding out more about entrepreneurship weighed more than like my finance at that moment. So I knew for sure, because I searched online too. I was like, okay, at least I need 6 months of savings in my bank account, in case anything goes wrong. And again, having that timeline in case I really don't make money, then I have to find a job, so I have to work my butt off to do that. But basically, when I quit my job, I was actually in desperate mode because, first of all, I feel like my life is like falling apart again because I need to figure out what I want to do in life again. So that was like a huge breakdown. And then second of all, finance, right? So what I did was, apart from building my personal brand as a coach on Instagram at that time, I was also finding tutoring outside. So I actually tutored art in different areas, like different people's houses. But then after a while, I realized that's sustainable because COVID happened at that time. And then also the kids, sometimes the parents are like, oh, they have swimming class, I had to cancel. Then I realized like that's not sustainable because that would be like part of my small income coming in. And then I'm like, okay, then I should find something more stable, but not a full time. So I found like an art center that's a part time. So I can still like build my personal brand coaching and continue working with my clients as I have something on the side to keep me running. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's been happening for like a bit before, until I realized like, okay, now I built up my clients in coaching that I'm like, okay, I can like, slowly stop the part-time. So that's what literally happened. Like it took some time, but I finally got to a point where I'm like, okay, I can not do the tutoring anymore.
In a way, you also did not quit with absolutely nothing lined up, right? Because you were already kind of like testing out, doing e-commerce and online marketing when you're having a job. And that kind of gave you the basis of like, okay, you can potentially use this skill to make something out of it when you eventually quit the job. And I love how you also did some maybe freelance or like part-time jobs just so you could sustain yourself. That's essentially buying yourself some time to figure out like how you're going to make this work in longer term. So, after that experience, would you actually say it's good for people to start experimenting different maybe part-time or freelance jobs before they actually finally pull the trigger of quitting their job? Like, what's the biggest takeaway from that whole process of figuring out what would work for you?
For sure. I think anyone who quit their job, don't do it like me. Don't quit cold turkey with no backup plan, just based on your emotions. Definitely find like either have a next thing lined up, or if not, allow yourself time to really think and not just like, like, oh, let me try that. Actually sit down and think and reflect on what you're good at, your skills, what do you like doing, and what can actually make you money. For sure have some kind of part-time if you don't feel like you're good at taking risk for that, like short, like 3 months maybe. If you give yourself 3 months, like, okay, I should find clients or whatever you want to do, make sure you give yourself those 3 months to like that, taking risks in those 3 months. If not, line up a part-time or something, because I know sometimes like it could feel desperate or like stress or like give you anxiety for like, oh, no income is coming in, So it's better to give yourself like a time limit for that risk, and then definitely find a part-time or something.
I know that you have already gone freelance for more than a year by now. So throughout this time period, what are some of the highlights and what have been some of the challenges? Because, like you quit and then you became a coach, and then now you're actually also a content creator. So you have also gone through quite a bit of switches during this time period as well.
I did. So thankfully now I know that like my area of expertise are more like marketing, media / content creation. So going into this direction, I was like, okay, coaching could be a future thing, but at this moment I'm not accepting like coaching clients. I transitioned completely from coaching to content creation because actually I worked with a few coaches myself, and we figured out like, oh, I'm actually more suited for content creation because I come from a creative background, which makes sense because coaching is more like you're like a therapist in some sort of way. Yes. So I transitioned to my content from coaching to content creation now, as you may see, lifestyle and travel. And yeah, I'm more happy in this sense because I'm like, okay, still same in the online personal branding space, but also, building my own personal brand in other aspects. And so I also was like, okay, then what other things can I do? So I'm also doing production work, and I'm working with other clients where I help them film and edit, basically like a production company. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing alongside building my own personal brand.
I mean, of course, for this episode, we need to talk about the money perspective. Then I think now that our listeners know that you have made the switch from coaching to content creators, I feel like they are probably going to be asking, but Abbie, how do you really make money from working as a content creator? So if you could share at all, like roughly how much you're making as a freelancer right now, and how do you normally budget a bit differently compared to when you had a 9-to-5 full-time job?
Again, since being a fresh grad at that time, I had no concept of money. So whatever is coming in, I did not budget. I literally did not budget. I was like, lunch, let's go out to eat. Like, I did not think about money at all. I was like, okay, just come in. Like, honestly, as a fresh grad, I was like, wow, that's a lot of money coming in, every month I get money, like that much of money coming in every month. But silly me. So at that time I did not budget. And then when I came out, I realized the importance of budgeting. And I'm like, okay, for sure I have to, know how much you save, how much you spend, and know where to invest. So I also learned that because I invested in coaches, so that was like an investment to myself. So I also put percentages. So for example, what I did was like a 50-30-20 rule, where I like save 50-30 for spending for like necessities or whatnot and wants, and then 20 is more like investing in like, long-term stocks or investing in myself, like books or like, whatnot, like coaches or courses, that kind of thing. Yeah. But as a content creator side of things, when you say like, oh, what I make and all that, thankfully I make triple the amount of what I made before in corporate. So thankfully for that. But again, as a freelance, it's not guaranteed what I make every month is the same, right? It's not a stable income. So some months you make more, some months you might not make that much. But it's like, it depends on like how much you work and like who you know and all that too. But I definitely think it's better now than before, because obviously before there's like a ceiling cap.
Mm-hmm.
The company determines how much you make, right?
That's true.
And then here you have the flexibility and the time to like actually strive for how much you want to make. Yeah. But you really need to like know the risk of when you don't have a 9 to 5, you do risk of you might not even have like any income coming at all in certain months. And that actually happened in the beginning when I started. Like I was actually freaking out the first like few months, like before I actually started tutoring. I was like, oh no, nothing is coming in. What do I do? And that's when like it kicks in. Okay, I need to start finding things and like keep myself stable and all that.
Wow. So, I mean, now that, of course, you're doing much better off than when you first started freelancing. So what would be the framework for budgeting? Like you mentioned, there could be months where, you earn a little less than the others. So how would you actually segment your income so you will be ready for maybe the days or months where the income is not as much as some other months?
I would say for sure I have a baseline. So because I'm still new to the content creation, but the production work is doing well with the clients. I keep the production work as like my base, and then the content creation is like the extra. So right now, like there's brand deals, and I charge, for example, reels. I would say like roughly starting $1,000 per reel. And yeah, so that's like an extra thing, and passive income's coming from like YouTube and like Etsy shop, the small things I do on the side, like there's passive income coming in. So yeah, so I would say like have an active income and then have like multiple passive incomes so that they all work together every month. And so that's what I've been doing. And then also budgeting at the end of the month. Making sure like it's all sectioned out with different categories.
So you actually like sit yourself down at the end of every month to kind of like look through all the numbers.
For sure.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, that brings me to the point of live admin, right? Like, of course, it sounds really nice to be working as a freelancer. Many people would imagine that's a life with a lot of freedom. But then as we know, working as a freelancer, the freedom is not completely free. That could come with a lot of really tedious live admin, for example, like figuring out accounting, filing for taxes and all that. So are there any like money matters or like live admin tasks that you realize you have to do as a freelancer, something that you never expected that you have to do when you used to work 9 to 5?
You literally put on all the hats. I feel like I've gained so much skills in the past years. It's like unreal. You do everything from like bringing up contracts, setting invoices, graphic design, video recording, editing, like from thinking of project I do project management. I don't even need to look for a job for that. I'm doing project management, like sales, marketing, negotiation, all that stuff. Every little thing you need to have control over. So yeah, that's all the life admin stuff as a freelancer.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah.
But now looking back, after everything that you have achieved, everything that you've gone through, would you actually have done anything differently?
Even though how much I stressed in the very, very beginning when I quit my job, I don't think I'll do anything differently, because I think it's that stress that pushed me to grow a lot faster. And it's funny because lots of things that you think didn't help before, it actually built up to who I am now in a way. So like it's like connecting the dots. It's like you're just leaving dots while you go, and then now it's all like making sense.
That's nice. Wow.
So I wouldn't regret anything. I wouldn't do anything differently.
It's such an incredible journey, and I'm so glad that we get to hear your story, because like really your story is the prime example of like, going into something without really knowing what to expect, but then you just really figure out the next step along the way. It's not even the next big step. It's like you kind of like come a long way through many micro steps as well.
Yes, for sure.
before we move on to the next segment, what kind of advice would you have for those who are currently considering getting out of that daily grind? Is even freelancing for everyone, right? Like some people might think it's so nice to have all the freedom in the world as freelancer, but of course we talked about there are challenges, there are live admin, there are not so glamorous sides to being a freelancer. So how would you advise our listeners when they are considering getting out of that 9-to-5 job? What are some of the practical steps that you would think they should take when they make this decision?
Yeah, I think a lot of times freelancing or like being a digital nomad and all that is overly glamorized, I would say. Because again, it's probably sounds amazing. Oh, having the freedom, you can like go to a cafe and work and all that. But again, you might not be able to like make money for months or whatnot. So it's better to figure out the why. I think the purpose of why you want to quit your 9-to-5 in the first place and what you want to get yourself into. I know it takes time, like it's step-by-step process, but still like have a why, and you're not just quitting because you're tired or whatnot. It's like because you have a purpose, you have a bigger purpose that you want to fulfill in life. So I would say like, again, first you do a risk assessment test. I think that's so important. Like if any big decision you do. And then also have to be very open-minded in the pros and cons, because sometimes I know like people who are like unhappy in their 9-to-5 job might feel desperate and just want out, aka me. And just sometimes it just doesn't work for everyone, and you say try it out, again, get the part-time job if you have to. But I would also say like it's important to know your life goals also. So what I did actually, I made like an Excel sheet where there's like 3 buckets. So like the first bucket, it's more like, okay, what are my necessities in life? So I would list out like all my expenses of what I need to survive, basically, like food, transport, rent, like utilities, bills, whatnot. And then that's like my must have. And I'm like, okay, how much I need to make to survive in this bucket of survival. And then the next bucket is more like nice to have. So apart from the necessities, I would add on like movies once a week, or like going out to restaurants, bars, like what are the nice to have things that are, or like buying a luxury good, something like that. And then what do I have to make so that I can sustain that part of life? And then the third was more like very, very good to have. So like, or dream goals bucket list, like, okay, how much is it to have a private jet, if that's the life you want, like private jet or like a private chef and all that. Realistically list out how much it would cost, and then how much would you make, how much would you need to make in order to fulfill that lifestyle. So when you list that all out, I think it's more realistic in a way, because you see numbers and you actually sometimes think like, oh, I actually don't need to make that much to sustain what the life I need. But if I wanted to get to that goal, like how can I calculate so that I can get to that lifestyle? So I think that really helped me see things in like a bigger picture, and was like, okay, this is for now. I want to like the nice to have. I want to like have these things and experience these in life, and so I should make this much, that kind of thing. So like that's like more like a goal thing, and to see how you want to finance and like budget everything. That's one thing that I have when I think of for like helping people if they want to like, finance things.
You actually gave us really like 2 really good frameworks, which is of course the risk assessment that you mentioned. And you really are just kind of suggesting us to visualize everything, write down all the pros and cons, just to see it in front of you. Then you will be able to gain some clarity, right? And then now you're also giving us another new framework, which is like writing down all the necessary expenses every month, and also some of the financial goals or like dreams that you have. But I think, from talking to you, it also reminds me that, that whole importance of just being comfortable with not knowing what's ahead. Like, you don't always have to have the answer, because to be honest, no one has the answers. Like anyone that you see on the street, they probably don't know what's going on in their life as well. And I love how you have been really experimenting like different options. Like if some options don't work, that's fine. You just get the answer that that's just something that doesn't work for you. And then also you kind of also mentioned how when you were making the decision to quit that corporate job, you would always have that backup plan, which is if everything doesn't go well, you will be prepared to go back to corporate. So I think that's a very important mindset for our listeners to have, like whenever they're thinking about quitting their job, or like if you have already quit your job, don't feel ashamed that maybe eventually you have to go back to that 9 to 5 just so you can figure your life out. So
right.
That's
again,
great.
The freelancing is like not for everyone. So there's no shame at all in being in a 9 to 5 at all. So there is just different work styles, and no one is better than the other. So
yeah, I agree.
For sure to keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, so every failed attempt gets you closer to the answer. So
correct. Yeah.
But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Fires. And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life. And in Abbie's case, it's biased questions that people have about, working as a freelancer, working in interior design, and quitting that 9 to 5 life. So Abbie, are you ready for all the questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You're very experienced in answering all these questions.
Yes. Get it all the time.
Let's go. First question. Oh, you are an interior designer. Can you decorate my house?
And then I would say, I'm a commercial interior designer. So now I don't actually decorate houses. I design law firms, banks, corporate not houses. I was gonna say houses again. corporate buildings, lobbies, and all that, lifts. And I always want to tell them, like, if you want to decorate your house, you can find it on Pinterest. You don't need a person with a degree to decorate your house. Anyone can do decoration. But because in design, we do like fire safety, AC, plumbing, and all that. So that's way more than just the aesthetics, even though that's also part of it. And picking furniture, it's all fun. But the hard part is like the walls, how the AC runs, how the water plumbing works. There's way more than that.
Or like maybe your response could be like, do you have an office for me to design?
Yeah. Yeah. More like that.
Yeah. And the next question is, I hate my job, but I can't change now.
I get that a lot from my colleagues before, actually. I in a way, it's a bit of my pet peeve, because I'm just like, wow, I'm trying to get out of this job. Like, you're telling me you're just stuck here? So then I'm just like, have to be open-minded. You have to like find out what you like. Like, don't hate your job, because basically you're doing that for like every single day. Like, basically you're hating your life if you're just like in a job that you hate every day. And it's just never too late to change, because we never stop learning. And I would say, like, if that person hates their job now, in 10 years time, they would still hate their job. And you would lose that 10 years of time of learning and going to another industry, maybe.
I think from other people that I've talked to about like quitting their 9 to 5 is that one of the most telling signs in their current workplace was that to observe whether or not their colleagues are miserable. Like, are their managers, are their bosses thriving, or do they look like they hate their lives? That's a very telling sign to decide if you should get out of there.
Yeah. Sure.
And the third question is, what if you fail?
What if you fail? So I will say, like, so what if you succeed? And also, like, what is the definition of failure, actually? Like, what is fail? Like, when do you actually... I think the only time you fail is if you actually just give up and not try or not start at all. Because if you fail, that means you just made a small mistake and you learn from it. So that's actually a gain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a failure. So I don't think anyone actually failed. You just have to just keep going and tackle it, problem solve, get over it. And then one day that person will succeed. There's no failure.
True. And even if you fail, so what?
Yeah, exactly. So what? And you just lose the chance of succeeding because you missed the opportunity if you don't just fail and learn until you succeed.
And the next question is, luxury life of no 9 to 5, time and location freedom forever.
Yes. So as I said before in the previous one, definitely is not for the faint of heart. Like there's a lot of mental challenges not being in the 9 to 5 because you don't have a stable income. You have to constantly innovate, change up. There might be competitions, making things work, and maybe not even having people supporting you. Maybe not even your family sometimes. So it's a lot of mental like support that you like give yourself, or tell yourself everything's gonna be okay. So it's not really for the faint of heart, but it is fun. You take risk, you do have flexibility, but it's not a luxury life all the time. It's not always glamored like people glamorize it.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I love how you're actually giving us this real talk as well. And the last question. So you just take and post pictures for work?
I get that all the time, especially people who don't know the industry. They're like, you just post pictures of your selfies? I was like, huh? My response is just, usually I'm just like, no, it's more than that. But yeah, so basically, thankfully, because of coaching, I became more comfortable in talking in front of the camera every day, like speaking to the camera. But it's a lot more than just taking photos. Like, again, being a freelancer, you're taking up all the hats. There's like editing photo, there is what you're posting, you're engaging, you're keeping tracks of insights, and then you're posting it, and then you're repeating the whole thing over again the next day. And you just not just the IG part, you might need to do in multiple platforms, YouTube, maybe TikTok, maybe like the little red book. And then apart from that, you still have to like market yourself, connect, pitch to brands, and then all that apart, you need to be your own fashion stylist because you're going out, and then you like it's just a lot.
It's everything. It's really everything. I mean, like, I completely agree, because like also coming from that like production background, like we are so used to hearing people like, oh, like you film and you take photos, it means you just press the button, right? I'm like, yeah. Or like for people who are doing the lighting, so, oh, you're just fixing the light. What's so hard about it?
Right. All that work behind it and the knowledge of like where to place the light is actually very important too.
Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely a misconception about production, everyone. But yes. Thank you so much for answering all the questions in this rapid bias segment.
Yay!
Now, for us to close out the episode, Abbie, for those who would like to follow your work, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, YouTube, or I have a website, and they're all under the same name. So it's abigailchin.co.
Amazing. Go follow her on social media, because Abbie has been pushing out a lot of like really creative and glamorous wedding content and also travel content. I mean, congratulations on your wedding, by the way. It looks so good.
People were like, did you get married for the whole year? Because like you've been milking it. I was like, yeah.
But then you definitely shared a lot of really practical tips for a lot of like brides to be though. So for our listeners who are about to get married, you should definitely go check out Abbie's
Yes, they're
reels.
all in the guides. Have to look at all of them. There's both Chinese and Westernized.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love that cultural aspect of it. Yeah. But of course, before we leave the episode, we can't leave without asking our guests this question. Finally, Abbie, what does it mean to be proudly Asian to you?
I would say embracing all the cultures, traditions, customs, proudly showcasing the different aspects of being Asian. So again, with what you just said with the wedding content, I proudly showcase like, what we do in tea ceremony, how do we put invitations, what are the small customs. I think these things are good to showcase like why I'm so proudly Asian, right? Like my culture, this is what I want to share and share it to the world. Yeah, and I think people like hearing about it too, because other cultures are like, oh, I never know about what you do in Hong Kong or the Chinese culture, and then they want to learn more about it. And I love that people are asking questions about it too.
That's amazing. And I love how there are people who are actually doing a bit of that like cultural exchange on your reels, because they would actually tell you, oh, in a certain culture, we do it this way, you know, and it's so similar to other cultures as well. And that's when you realize, oh, wow, we're doing the same thing despite we come from very different cultures. So Abbie, thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian. And I really love the fact that you're so real with us, sharing your experience, quitting that 9-to-5 job, and then showing us that it's possible to make it work, defying society's concept of success. And then there are so many ways to figure out how to work your life. And Abbie's story is one of the options out there. But then for our listeners out there, it's completely okay if you figure out a way that works for yourself, but that's completely different to what the society expect, you know, things to work. So thank you so much, Abbie.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.